Speaking of Pastor Blake, he's been taking us on a bit of a time traveling adventure as we've been working through an extended series this year, the longest series I've ever seen at this church. And this is the church I've been at the longest, so probably just in general the longest series I've ever seen. And it's been super fun, and we've done a lot. We're working our way through the life of Jesus, and I'm really excited. It's the first time I've been included in a part of somebody else's series. Anna and I talked about it a little bit a few weeks ago before she had preached about how kind of nerve-wracking it is to try and mesh into and not mess up somebody else's flow and setup that they have. But Pastor Blake's given us a lot of freedom within it. He's just kind of given us the text and told us the vibe and was like, all right, anyway, you come up with everything else. So it's been a lot of fun, and I'm really excited to continue on with what Pastor Blake has been teaching. Last week, he taught about values in the kingdom, about how different those values are, about how the calculation of value is so inverted. It's so different from what we typically use as metrics for value in our own world. And then he ended on how all of these teachings that Jesus has done on value, on human value and on value to the kingdom, as well as revelations about his own identity, has caused him to get all of this conflict and confrontation, and everybody's hunting him down, everybody's ticked off at him, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, can you believe it? Both of them, two big rival factions in the Jewish religious elite at the time have joined forces to try and get him, which is just was the crossover event of the century. And so he goes where we left off last week. The little tease that Pastor Blake gave us was Jesus and his disciples actually removed themselves from the cities, and they go off to the wilderness on the other side of the Jordan, and they just kind of let things simmer for a little bit. They know they've got the Passover coming up, the big show is coming, and so they're just going to let things settle. They're going to let things simmer, and they're going to not get hunted down and executed yet. We're going to just chill and let things settle down. Well, Jesus is done doing that. Where we're picking up now. It was, a couple of verses of that. And he was like, anyway, it's time to go back, guys. We've got work to do. So they had a nice vacation, a nice little breather where they weren't being hunted down, and now they are on their way back. And everybody knows that they're on their way back. So the narratives that we're going to be looking at today, our primary texts, where we're going to spend pretty much all of our time, are going to be found in Luke, chapters 18 and 19. We're going to start around verse 35 and 18, and we're going to go clean through verse 27 and 19. That's where we're going to be spending pretty much all of our time, if you want to follow along with us. Now, where we are jumping in, the religious leaders know that Jesus is on his way back. He's leaving the wilderness and he's returning to Jerusalem. He stops at Jericho along the way. He's on his way back to Jerusalem. And they know this because it's Passover. And so we get a glimpse into what they're thinking and what they're planning in John chapter 11. I just told you guys to go to Luke, and now I'm going to go to John, though. But you don't have to, because it's 3 sentences, and that's it. John 11, starting in verse 55 to 57. And the Passover of the Jews was nearby, and many went from the country up to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. Then they being the Pharisees and the Sadducees, then they sought Jesus, and they spoke among themselves, and they stood in the temple. What do you think, that he will not come to the feast? They're having a nefarious little meeting. It's they're planning. What do you think? He's not going to come to the feast? Of course he's going to come to the feast. Now, both the chief priests, that's the Sadducees, they're the ones kind of the majority of the power in the Jewish religious leadership. The chief priests and the Pharisees had given a command that if anyone knew where he was, he should report it, that they might seize him. So they know he's coming. And Jesus knows that they know that he's coming. And so he does what any of us would do in this kind of situation when he's trying to sneak into Jerusalem. And that is, of course, he does a tour, like he's going on tour with his band. He's going to just make a stop at all the major cities between where he's at and Jerusalem so everybody knows. And that's where we're going to join him. We're going to jump in as he's arriving at the city of Jericho. The passages today are really fun because it's two really tightly wound narratives. We're going to see stories that many of you are probably familiar with. Bartimaeus, a blind man, meets Jesus outside of the city. And then Zacchaeus, a short man, meets him inside of the city. And these stories are two different men waiting in two different circumstances for two different purposes. But Luke very deliberately intertwines them side by side and parallels a lot of the same narrative beats in order to bring out a certain point. And then at the end of that, Jesus teaches a parable, kind of using all of the experience that everybody just had to illustrate something about kingdom life. So that's what we're going to be looking at. Let's, before we go any further, dive into the text. I'm going to be reading them kind of in that parallel fashion. So we're going to jump back and forth between 18 and 19, between Bartimaeus and Zacchaeus, to see how their stories are developing in tandem. But just keep in mind, the Zacchaeus stuff happens literally right after he comes into the city from talking with Bartimaeus, so your chronology doesn't get too messed up. So, both of these men are at Jericho, and they're going to be continuing with the noble tradition of God's people at Jericho, which is spending an awful lot of time waiting for God to do something. So we join them in 1835. Then it happened, as he was coming near Jericho, that a certain blind man sat by the road begging, and hearing a multitude passing by, he asked what it meant. So they told him that Jesus of Nazareth was passing by, and he cried out, saying, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Bartimaeus is outside of the city. He's continuing this long tradition that the Israelites have of waiting outside of the city of Jericho. Of course, the last time we were in Jericho, or the first time we were in Jericho, it was Joshua chapter 5 and 6. There's this big battle, and for those of you that aren't keened in on your Bible trivia in this particular subgenre yet, they have to walk around the city over and over and over again for like a week straight, and then on the seventh day they do it 7 times. That's a lot of walking. Cities aren't small. They weren't huge back then, but they're not small. It's a lot of walking and a lot of waiting. And this dichotomy between waiting and walking is what we're going to be exploring through these two narratives today. It's fitting then that it happens at Jericho. Mark identifies this blind man as Bartimaeus, the name that we've been using up to this point. This is in a parallel text in Mark 10, 46 through 52. And the stories are pretty much identical, so we're mostly just going to stick in Luke. But there's a couple of details that Mark includes that Luke doesn't, and I'll bring those up when they become relevant, so don't stress out too much about them. Now, something to keep in mind, there's a crowd waiting for Jesus. Everybody knows that he's coming, and everybody's been told that when you hear that Jesus is coming, come let us know so we can arrest him. But it's not a secret. It's an open, known situation. Jesus is a-coming. He is on his way. And so we see Bartimaeus cries out, saying, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And then those who went before him, so the other folks who are all outside of the city waiting to see Jesus, they warned him that he should be quiet. "Hey, shut up, man." But he cried all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." You see, waiting isn't easy. Bartimaeus, he's just waiting outside the city. It doesn't seem like he's doing an awful lot of work, but waiting isn't easy. And all too often, we get this idea in our minds that waiting is a simple time. Many of you, perhaps all of you, have waited or are waiting on God for something in your lives right now, whether it's restoration in relationship, it's healing in some kind of physical way. You just don't know what the next step is, and you just need a little bit of clarity and direction. You're waiting on God to speak to you, to meet with you, or to act on your behalf. And waiting isn't easy. And the folks aren't being very cooperative. They're not being very supportive. He's waiting alongside a lot of other folks that are also excited to see Jesus. They're waiting for different reasons, and somehow still they're finding themselves coming into conflict and arguing with each other as they wait. Let's go to Zacchaeus' story and see how this is paralleled. In 19, verses 1 through 4, then Jesus entered, and he passed through Jericho. So this is right after he resolves the story with Bartimaeus. And now behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector, and he was very rich. They tacked that last part on there because if you do the tax collector job well and responsibly and ethically, you are just fine. You're not rich. But the way that the Roman tax system was set up, we're doing a little bit of a history lesson now. The way that the Roman tax system was set up, you were put in charge of a region that you had to tax, and then you would hire tax collectors to go out and do it. Zacchaeus is the guy in charge of the region. And you were told, you have to pay the Roman government this much in taxes. We don't care how you get it or who you get it from. You can make up your own tax policies within your region, within certain parameters, but you have freedom to do so. Just make sure that we get this much. And so what the tax collectors would often do is they would just, like, okay, well, we'll just tax more and send the minimum of what we have to pay, and then we get to keep a little extra. We can use it to pay for security. We can use it to pay for more employees. It's for the good of the empire. We really ought to. And all of a sudden, all of these people who are responsible for taking taxes to Rome are really taxing and paying themselves. This is what Zacchaeus is doing. Zacchaeus has become very wealthy because he is extorting the system and extorting his fellow citizens. So Zacchaeus was very rich, and he sought to see Jesus, who was on his way, but he could not because of the crowd, for he was short. So he ran ahead, and he climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was going to pass that way. Neither of these men are having an easy time waiting. Bob Sorge, who we talk about an awful lot at this church, we're big fans of him. He's a friend of the church and a great author and speaker. In his book, Secrets of the Secret Place, which is probably my top 3 of the books that I've read from him, and he's written a lot of books, guys. That's a lot of books. So he says this on this subject. He says, some people suppose that waiting on God is sitting by the pool and sipping on lemonade. Actually, it's one of the most violent things you'll ever do. It's just a wild way to put that. It's violent. You're fighting when you're waiting. When everything is screaming at you to do something, you are obeying his call to wait on him alone. You're giving him your full gaze until he releases his mercy. While waiting on God, Bartimaeus was shut down by those around him, the folks that were waiting alongside of him for Jesus as well. These are folks that he should be able to find companionship with, folks that he should be able to find camaraderie with. But instead of finding support, they're shutting him down because there's some kind of interference. There's like this scarcity mindset that if you get this blessing, I won't get this blessing. You waiting in the wrong way is going to mess up my waiting. It's going to get in the way. And Zacchaeus, he wasn't able to see through the crowd for a couple of reasons. We mentioned already that he's short, so he can't stand behind it and see. But, I mean, he could have just, excuse me, pardon me, made his way through the crowd and made his way on up. But there's something that is very prevalent in the culture that doesn't really show up in this text that Zacchaeus would be very afraid of. And that's that a certain group of a certain faction of Jewish faithful called themselves the Zealots, and they had a really bad habit of knifing tax collectors. And their favorite way of doing it was waiting in big crowds with daggers strapped to their hips underneath their robes, and they'd just be vibing and just doing their thing. And then, tax collector's coming through the crowd, and all of a sudden the crowd would start pressing in around the tax collector, and all of a sudden the short tax collector, no one can see him anyway, and now he falls down, and the crowd disperses. If they drop the knife, they vanish into the crowd. It's like the first order of assassins that ever existed. And that's not an exaggeration. They're like documented as like the first ones. It's wild. And they were organized. This group became so extreme that the Zealots were like, hey guys, you got to stop stabbing random folks just because they do jobs you don't like. And they said, we're not going to do that. So around like the 50s AD, they actually split off and became their own separate group called the Sicarii, which is the coolest sounding word they could have picked. And it means the dagger boys. Yes. This is real life. Zacchaeus is probably terrified of this. He's like, I can't push my way through this crowd. I'm going to meet one of the dagger boys. So he's like, I know what I'm going to do about it. I'll climb this tree. It's not easy waiting for either of them, and for a multitude of reasons. All too often, though, we adopt this scarcity mindset. See, the Zealots, they believed Zacchaeus, he was in a class of folks that weren't even worthy of waiting on God. They had done such wrong things to the people of God through extortion and through taxing and through siding with the Romans that they didn't even deserve to wait. on the mercy of God. So we'll solve this ourselves. We'll just remove them from the situation. All too often, we adopt this same scarcity mindset. I've been waiting on God to act on my behalf. And every time somebody around me receives a blessing and their waiting comes to an end, it feels like they're getting blessing instead of me. I feel this. I don't know if you guys identify with that. I've talked with some folks that have felt this, so I know it's not just me, but I feel this all the time, And sometimes it's over dumb stuff, It's like I'll be praying about, I've got a sermon coming up. It's like January, and Pastor Blake asked me to preach in March, and I'm just waiting on God to tell me what he needs me to teach. And then Pastor Anna's like, hey, this is what God's been downloading to me about what I'm going to preach in February. And I'm like, cool, he ain't even talked to me yet, man. He ain't even talking to me yet, man. We get uppity about little stuff, and we allow it to distract us from our own waiting. These folks, they're not paying attention to Jesus coming up anymore. Now they're focused on Bartimaeus hollering out behind him and trying to shut him down. At the same time, we mustn't allow ourselves to become complacent in our waiting. It's not easy, but sometimes it's easier than others. You might be waiting, and this period of waiting is a refuge and a rest for you, and you're feeling refreshed and rejuvenated, and that's awesome, and you need that sometimes, and it's a gift from God, but it's not always the goal. We can't become complacent in our waiting. At this point, we're going to take our mandatory sidetrack because it's St. Patrick's Day, and we're going to talk about the patron saint of Ireland because it fits very well. He did a lot of waiting. St. Patrick was, as we all know, born around 390 AD in the British coastlands. The Roman Empire is here, they're present, they're ruling things, and then all of a sudden, what's that on Rome's doorstep? A bunch of Germanic barbarians. So they say, all the Roman legions in the far-flung parts of the empire, come on home. We need you to stab these angry, hairy boys. And so all of the Roman legions in Britain, they all go home. And then Britain is left with no government, with no military, and an awful lot of angry Irishmen on the other side of not a lot of water. And so these angry Irishmen start raiding the coastlands. Patrick is taken as a prisoner. He's sold into slavery around the age of 15, and he lives decades, not decades, I think it's around a decade, as a slave for the chief druid of his local community. It's like the ancient equivalent of like an earl or like a duke. Like it's a local nobleman. It's the most powerful, wealthy figure in the local community. And it's during this time of waiting that Patrick comes to faith in Jesus. And during this time of waiting, he begins to pray for an opportunity for freedom, to be freed from the druid that he's enslaved to. Now, this guy's pretty chill as far as druids go. Like, they did a lot of human sacrifice, so not super chill, but like medium chill for a druid. And so he's like treating his slaves well if they do well, It's like, hey, you've done a great job. I trust you now. I'll give you a little bit more comfort. And remember, he's the wealthiest man in the area. So like his favorite slaves, they live more comfortable lives than half of the folks that are free under this guy's rule, just because this guy's got a lot of money. He's got a lot of wealth. The problem here is even though Patrick is a great slave, he's very good at his job. He's a Christian, which means he has zero rights, zero value in their society. But if he would convert to Druidism, he could have a very comfortable life. He could have the comforts and the joys that he's been denied all this time. But he doesn't become complacent in the waiting. The waiting doesn't dull him to the desire for God's call. And so he continues to pray, he continues to watch, and eventually his opportunity comes. He leaves, he goes home, he escapes. It's a whole adventure. There's like all kinds of stuff that happens. He becomes a priest, and then he becomes a bishop, and now that he's a bishop, he says, hey guys, hey Pope, send me back to Ireland. And Pope says, hey, weren't they really mean to you? He said, yeah, I gotta go tell them about Jesus. And Pope's like, oh, that's dope, man, high five. And so the Pope sends him off to Ireland. They probably didn't high five back then. I think that was actually invented in like the 50s. He goes off to Ireland and he brings them the gospel. And it's like this radical story that now we commemorate the day of his passing. Today's the day that he died. Not today, it was a while ago, but it was March 17th. because he didn't become complacent in his waiting. And during his waiting, his heart changed towards the people that had enslaved him. See, waiting changes hearts. We see this in these narratives as well. So let's go back in. Let's rejoin Bartimaeus, starting in verse 40. So Jesus stood still, and he commanded him to be brought to him. And when he had come near, he asked him, saying, man, there's a lot of pronouns. Hebrew doesn't translate well, or Aramaic, I should say here. There's a lot of pronouns. He, being Jesus, commanded that he, being Bartimaeus, is brought to him, being Jesus. And then he, being Jesus, asked him, Bartimaeus, saying, what do you want me to do for you? And he, being Bartimaeus, said, Lord, may I receive my sight? And Jesus said to him, receive your sight. Your faith has made you well. And immediately he received his sight and followed him, glorifying God. And all of the people that were with him, when they saw it, they gave praise to God. They've kind of changed their tunes now. There's been a heart change. Now, this is the part where I told you Mark includes a little bit of a different detail that Luke doesn't include in here. At this point, I think it's around 10:49 in Mark, Jesus says, hey, bring Bartimaeus over here. And then all of the people that were just hollering and yelling at Bartimaeus, they turn around and they're like, hey, man, this is great, man. Come on, let's go. You're my bestie, and I've always loved you. And I've always wanted you to have this. Let's go. And they kind of changed their tune a little bit. And there's two ways that we could read this. Either they're being pretty two-faced, and now that the winds have shifted, they're tacking their sails, and they're changing course along with it. But the other way to understand this seems to go more in line with the heart change that we see at the end, which is seeing his continual faith, his continued desire to call out to Jesus, and Jesus' mercy and grace in answering him and calling him to him. There seems to be some real heart change that occurs here. The people that were set against Bartimaeus have their hearts changed because of his faithfulness in waiting. And so we see at the end of both of them, both Mark and Luke's accounts of this narrative, their result is praise and worship of Jesus and God. Zacchaeus has a very similar but very deliberately contrasted result from his waiting as well. So let's rejoin him starting in verse 5 of chapter 19. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and he saw him being Zacchaeus, and said to him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must stay at your house. And I'm just going to say, this is a thought that I had the other day when I was reading through this for like the 8th time this week, and that must have scared Zacchaeus, because I don't know if you guys are keeping track of this. There's 2 guys that travel with Jesus all the time who are active members of the Zealot faction, and one of them is so into it that they call him Simon the Zealot, and you gotta be really into it to be called Simon the Zealot, you know what I mean? So this isn't probably super exciting. There's probably a moment of like, oh, beans. That's it for me, I guess. I shouldn't have gotten in the tree. Jesus is like, come on down, Zacchaeus. And Simon the Zealot's like, yeah, man. Come on down. But Zacchaeus does. He's really cool about it. He's a big, strong, brave boy. So he made haste, and he came down, and he received him joyfully. But when they saw it, they being this gathered crowd, the crowd inside the city, it's a different crowd than the crowd that was outside the city. When they saw it, they didn't like it. And they started complaining, saying, he's gone to be a guest with a man who is a sinner? Like, this guy, he's been robbing us for years. This guy's the worst. He's taken our money and given it to the Roman occupiers. He's going to go have dinner with this guy? You got to be kidding me. And then Zacchaeus stood and he said to the Lord, look, Lord, I give half of all that I have to the poor. And if I've taken anything from anyone falsely, which he has, I will restore it 4-fold. That's a lot. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. Zacchaeus wanted to see Jesus. But he was moved to repentance when he realized that Jesus saw him for more than just the mistakes that he had made, more than just the ways he had wronged those around him. When he realized that Jesus saw him as a man and a man in need of grace and mercy, that is when Zacchaeus' heart changed. And it changes in a big way. There's action that's required of him to make things right, and he voluntarily begins to do it to the point of probably going into destitution, because 4 times the money that you extort is probably most of your money. See, waiting is never pointless. Bartimaeus had been waiting all of his life for Jesus' power. Even at times before he knew that it was Jesus' power that he was waiting on, he was waiting all of his life for something, for God to move on his behalf. But it prepared him, the waiting prepared him to call out boldly in faith. Zacchaeus, he didn't even know what he was waiting for. He just wanted to see what was going on, who this special man was that everybody was getting so excited about. But the waiting prepared him to respond when Jesus called out to him. See, waiting is like being plugged in to a power source. See, I told you the charger was going to come up again. How perfect is that? It's like being plugged into a power source. Something that I tease my wife, Sarah, a lot about. Actually, not so much anymore because she got a new phone. But I used to tease her all the time about how her phone was always on the verge of death. It would be like 10 in the morning on a Saturday, and her phone's at 30% power. I'm like, babe, how did you do that? How is this possible? Well, I didn't plug it in last night. Well, why didn't you plug it in last night? Well, I already got all cozy, and I hadn't plugged it in yet, so I'm not going to plug it in. And then, sure enough, we're out somewhere. We're like hiking at Marietta Park in New Bern or something, and halfway around the 3-mile loop, her phone dies, and I was like, okay, well, if we need something, we can't phone about it, because your phone's dead. The flip side of this coin is that I like compulsively plug things into charge. For example, a laptop that has about a 5-hour battery life, that is fully charged because I charged it all night. I plugged in up here, just in case. And then forgot that I plugged it in up here and knocked over a bunch of stuff when I tried to come out here. And I do this with my phone too. So I'm at the house and I'll get a phone call and I have to go jogging across the house to find where I plugged my phone in and answer it. It's like I've turned it back into a landline. I've time traveled to 1996. I'm in my office over here and I'll set it on the charger and then I'll go and I'm going to listen to some audiobooks and do some vacuuming. I'm like, nice. And it's crazy. It's getting so intense and so people are probably fighting or stabbing or something. And then all of a sudden I walk out of range and I got to run back and get my phone because I'm too insecure to detach it from the power source. I'm missing the point of the waiting is to empower it for what comes after the waiting. Waiting has a point. It's never pointless. There's purpose in your waiting. You're waiting for a reason. You can't miss it. Don't miss the purpose that is happening now in your waiting. The purpose doesn't happen just at the end. It's happening now. It happens along the way. Just because you are in a period of waiting, whether it's waiting for direction, waiting for God's power, waiting for his face, you just need that moment of intimacy with him, there's purpose in it. Now, there's a point to it. So what are you waiting for? What is it that you are waiting to accomplish or achieve? What does God have you waiting towards? Continuing with Bob Sorge's quote from earlier, right on the heels of what we read earlier, that it isn't easy, that it's the most violent thing you'll ever do. He goes on to say this, while waiting for God, wait on God. I'm always a big fan of puns, so we got one here, you know? You got waiting on God like you're waiting, and then you got wait on God like a server, which is very fun little pun. We wait for God to move in power. Someone once said, we should seek his face and not his hand. But I disagree. We seek his face and his hand. We seek the intimacy of his face, but we also seek the power of his hand. We don't have to choose between intimacy and power. We can pursue both. And that's what we see in these narratives that are paralleling today. Bartimaeus is waiting on God to do something for him. He needs Jesus to do something for him. It's not like some super deep, incredibly powerful, self-sacrificial waiting thing. He's not waiting to have some big moment of service. He needs Jesus to do him a favor. He's just waiting on Jesus' power. And it's what he's supposed to be doing. He's not being selfish in this waiting. Zacchaeus didn't really know why he was waiting. He just knew something needed to change. He needed something to move and change in his life because it wasn't working the way it was. He was going everywhere scared of guys in pajamas with knives. He needed something to change. And when something did change, action was required to make it right. We usually think of waiting as something that's humbling or something that's lowly. But waiting required both of these men to have surprising levels of boldness and bravery. Bartimaeus had to withstand the shouts of the crowd trying to shut him down. Folks that have seen him begging outside of the city for years and now are turning against him and preventing him from speaking out and seeking Jesus. Zacchaeus, there's guys that want to stab him at the bottom of the tree. And then he had to be willing to confront the possibility of that fate when Jesus called him to come down and act. Bartimaeus was honored by being called to come to him and then receiving healing. And Zacchaeus was honored by being given the opportunity to repent and to make things right. At the end of waiting, there's always walking to be done. But also, usually, in the waiting, there is still walking that needs to be done. So we're going to continue forward. At the end of this, Jesus goes and he has dinner with Zacchaeus, and we don't get that scene. I bet it was pretty awkward with the two guys in Jesus' group that want to stab him, and he's got him at his dinner table, and he's just looking and he's like, Simon, Judas, what's up? And guys, Judas was like super not cool. We know that from later. That's a bit of a spoiler. But like Judas for sure would have stabbed this guy if Jesus wasn't looking. Like no doubt. This guy was the worst. If you guys haven't gotten that far yet, I'm sorry if I spoiled it. But after this, he heads on out and he continues along his way and he hears folks talking about what's going on. They start talking, and so we'll join in with him in verse 11 and see where he goes from here. He launches into a parable on the heels of all of this, capitalizing on the events that have just taken place. Now, as they heard these things, he spoke another parable, because he was near Jerusalem and because they thought the kingdom of God would appear immediately. Therefore, he said, a certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and then to return. Which starts out, that sounds kind of like a fairy tale, like the setup to a beautiful fairy tale. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, I think that actually is a book series that's based on that exact thing that my little brother read when we were young. And he's going to think this is really funny when he watches it later. He's working with the kids right now. So he called 10 of his servants, and he delivered to them 10 minas. And he said, a minas is like a quarter of your annual salary. He delivered to them 10 minas, and he said to them, do business until I come back. But his citizens hated him, and they sent a delegation after him saying, we will not have this man to reign over us. This is a really fun, political commentary that Jesus is doing. This is like a current events thing, because Herod the Great, you guys know Herod the one that stabs babies because he's super not cool, like the least cool guy. Before he becomes king of the Jews, he goes to Rome to schmooze up to Caesar. And he's like, hey, Caesar, I'm crazy about you. I'll be such a good king for you. And all of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, this was like the previous time that they united in something because they didn't like Herod. And so they sent a delegation. They were like, hey, Caesar, the guy's the worst. He's probably going to stab babies in like 30 years. You don't want this guy in charge. And so this is something that they did. The folks, they did this. So, and everybody would recognize this. It's very funny. To me, anyway. I think it's funny. He's like poking, like teasing them for... Like, remember when you tried this and it was like with a bad guy and it didn't work? We will not have this man to reign over us. And so it was that when he returned, having received the kingdom, he then commanded these servants to whom he had given the money to be called to him, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. Now this is starting to look like a pretty familiar parable. He's adapting parables that he's used before about the servants with the faithful with the talents and all that. So it's starting to ring some bells. We recognize the setup. He called to them that he might know how much money they had all gained by trading. And then came the first, saying, Master, your mina has earned 10 more mina. And he says, oh, that's tight. High five, you're in charge of 10 cities now, because I'm a king, and I got a bunch of cities. And this guy's like, oh, nice. I love cities. So cool. And then he says to the next guy, come on up. And he comes up and he says, hey, master, here's your mina, and I invested it, and I got you 5 more mina. And he says, that's awesome. 5 cities for you. High five. And then the last man comes up. There's only 3 that come up, but he gives them to 10. We don't get what happens with the rest of them. They might have been, maybe they were the ones that got sent to like go yell at him and tell him not to be king. They get killed at the end. But we're not going to get into that because we don't have 2 more hours to study this text. So the third one comes up, and he says, hey, what did you do with my money? He says, oh. And he does like a little magic trick, and he like pulls out a handkerchief, and he's like, I put it in this handkerchief, which is actually what it says. He puts it in a handkerchief. He says, I put it in a handkerchief because I was scared of you, and I thought if I lost this, then you'd probably stab me. And the king is like, dude, I told you to invest the money and to make more money while you were gone. What the heck are you doing, dude? Hey, everybody, take his money that I gave him and give it to the guy with 10 monies. And so they do that. They take it and they give it away. This is kind of a hard teaching, a difficult teaching from Jesus, especially when you get to the end where this like Herod figure is kind of like executing all these guys that came against him. But that's kind of a story that we would have to get into another day. The point is, it makes a lot more sense when you understand it in the context that has just occurred. See, he is deliberately pairing this narrative with the methods of exploitation that Zacchaeus employed to gain wealth. He is comparing very deliberately the methods of determining and achieving value according to the world's eyes with the methods of achieving value in the kingdom. And he's telling a story about the way that Zacchaeus has done it. He was a man entrusted with power, given authority. He was given a mina. And he used that mina to exploit an awful lot of folks and make a whole lot more minas. But what we see is by Zacchaeus' example is that the value in the kingdom is inverted. He had been entrusted with all of this wealth, but when he had this moment of repentance and an encounter with Jesus, all of the mina that had been used to create more wealth, to create more value, the true value of it was to invest it back into the people that he had wronged, to invest it back into the kingdom, to make restitution and to show repentance with it. These servants, they had been entrusted with wealth, and they had work to do while they waited for their king's return. There's another figure from Irish folklore from way back in the mythic Bronze Age that has a pretty extensive experience with waiting, so we're going to talk about him because, of course, it's Irish Day, so I get to talk about Irish stuff. And this bloke's name was Finn Mac Camail, and you can also say Finn McCool, but I think that sounds silly, so we're going to stick with Finn Mac Camail because I think it sounds more, there's more gravitas to it. Finn Mac Camail was like their King Arthur type figure, a similar kind of vibe to it. Low-born guy, ends up doing all kinds of heroic stuff, becomes king. It's a whole thing. It's wild. Irish mythology, guys, makes no sense. It's like they for sure were on hallucinogenics the whole time. It's wild. And I'm excited to go on this adventure with you. So Finn Mac Camail, wandering in the wilderness, High King has been assassinated that he serves, and everything's going bad, and he's like, oh, what am I going to do? Oh, no. And there's this old guy in the woods. You know how old guys in the woods be. And he meets this old guy in the woods, and this old guy in the woods, he says, oh, there's a stream over here. You should go stand in it, catch a big old salmon. And Finn does what anybody would do when an old man tells him to stand in a stream and catch a salmon, and he goes and he waits for like 3 days in the stream until this big old salmon, and he's like, I'll know this salmon when I see it. So there's all these salmon coming by, and he's like, not that one. I know it's not that one. Oh, not that one. I know it's not that one. And eventually the salmon get really used to him, and I don't think this is how salmon fishing works, by the way, guys. I don't know if it works this way, but maybe they hadn't invented better fishing yet. I don't know. But he's just standing there, and eventually he's like, that's the one. He scoops it up, like catches it with, like he noodles it, like a catfish. He catches it by the thumb, he pulls it up, and he's like, nice. And then he does what everybody would do after waiting 3 days to catch one fish. He fries that sucker up and he eats it. Oh, yum, 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 yum. Best salmon he's ever had. Now, as all of you expect, he's got a magic thumb. It turns out that thumb, he's got the thumb of knowledge. Nice. The thumb of knowledge, because of course it turned out this was the salmon of knowledge. And it makes sense that this was the salmon of knowledge because it had been eating the acorns of knowledge from further upstream. And none of this is made up, guys. And the acorns of knowledge were falling from a tree which was planted next to, how wild would it be if it was the tree of knowledge? Like that would have made a really good full circle, but it's not. It's just a tree. But the tree is next to a special well. And the well is the well of Sagaeus, which is Irish for forest, which is wild because there's another well called the Well of Knowledge, like 2 streams over that shows up in another story that Finn is in. And they missed that one. I don't know. That would have been great. But no, it's just a forest well. And so he eats this fish of knowledge, and now he's got a thumb of knowledge. And this thumb of knowledge gives him a super awesome power, which is whenever he encounters a bad situation, this big guy's this big, strong, burly warrior, just real hairy, so good at stabbing and being in charge. He sucks on his thumb, and he is gifted supernatural wisdom and insight into the situation because he sucks on his thumb of knowledge. Obviously. Guys, Irish mythology doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And so Finn spent an awful lot of time waiting, but once he was done with this, he knew that he had something to do with this thumb of knowledge. And so this thumb of knowledge, it made him able to hold off invaders. It made him to achieve a great and very important purpose. He ended up restoring the kingdom. He united all of the lesser kings that were warring with one another, and he eventually became the high king with not having to do a whole lot of conquering. He did a little conquering. But when his waiting came to an end, he knew it required action of him. Zacchaeus heard Jesus' call for him, and he acted. He saw the first painful steps of the purpose that the Lord had prepared for him, and he submitted to them. God wishes for good to come to you in the waiting. The waiting and the walking is just as much for your good as it is for the kingdom's. C.S. Lewis, he puts it this way. He says, you will certainly carry out God's purpose, however you act. But it makes a difference for you whether you choose to serve like Judas or to serve like John. See, we have standing orders even while we are waiting. The servants had been entrusted with tasks. They were told what to do with the wealth that they had. And while they waited for the king, they were walking at the same time. So let's revisit Finn MacCamale. He's uniting all of the warring kings, right? This wasn't done through conquest, like I mentioned. He had standing orders that had been left to him from the high king who had been assassinated. And he used his really cool magic thumb to accomplish those orders, except for one quick detour that he took where he went and assassinated the guy that killed his boss, but he wasn't a Christian. He didn't know Jesus yet. So, yeah, it is what it is. So he goes and kills that guy. And then other than that, he's pretty cool about it. He doesn't do a lot of conquering. Well, until the end, he does a little bit of conquering. But he had standing orders, and those standing orders were to hold off the invading Fomorians. And this is where we get some more wild Irish mythology. The Fomorians, as some of you almost certainly have no idea, they're these big, strong boys. Makes sense. They're big, scary invaders. They had one big leg, one big foot, and 2 arms, 2 normal but big, strong arms, 1 normal head, 1 big eye. Just weird guys. You would think not difficult, just a gentle nudge, and problem solved. But they were really mean, and their eye was like magic and make you get so scared that you would freeze, and they would just hop over to you and stab you. I don't know, man. So the big, scary Fomorians with 1 big leg, 1 big foot. And he had standing orders to fight off these invaders. And that's what he did. For years and years and years, he would just use his magic thumb-sucking power to figure out how to outsmart these invaders. And it eventually led him to his greater purpose. Through the pursuing of these standing orders from his high king, all of the lesser kings began to come and submit to him. And he eventually became high king. This reminds me an awful lot of David's story in 1 Samuel. David is anointed king at a young age. Samuel tells him, hey, you're going to be the next king after Saul, because Saul, he's kind of being a bit of a bozo. And Saul's like, hey, I heard that He didn't actually. But he calls him in, and he eventually becomes a warrior, and he becomes a general for Saul, and he gets a job from Saul. Saul says to him, he says, hey, your job, I need you to go kill all them Philistine folks every time they come over here. Just protect us from the Philistines. You're the best at killing Philistines I've ever seen. You just go take care of that. And he's so good at killing Philistines that everybody's like, man, this guy's great at killing Philistines. Let's sing a song about him. Saul doesn't like that. Songs should be about me. I'm king. My name is Saul. There's probably a lot of stuff that rhymes with Saul. Do songs about me. But they don't. They do songs about David. He doesn't like that. So he tries to kill David. David runs away. Now David is being hunted by Saul's army. And what does David do? He keeps doing his job that Saul gave him. He keeps fighting against the Philistines. He has standing orders. And eventually, following those orders, staying consistent even in the waiting, leads him into his purpose. He knew the orders he had been left with, and he knew to take steps along the way, even while he was waiting. So does your fear of misstepping prevent you from walking at all, even when you think you're still in a period of waiting? It does for me. I have analysis paralysis. I get so stressed out, and I don't want to make the wrong step, and so I just will freeze until I get something more specific and more clear. Let me get Dennis and Mr. Josh. Would you guys come up here and help me with something real quick? Yeah, that's for you. That's for you. Thanks. If you guys could just hold those out. Right. Just hold them up. Yeah, just keep them up. And so they have standing orders. They got standing orders. And it's really easy for us to freeze and get stuck trying to figure out the right way to follow these orders. Zacchaeus and Bartimaeus, they weren't called the same way as one another. And their waiting looked different.
We're good.
Oh, nice. You just keep it up. It's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. They weren't called the same way, and their call didn't result in the same action. Bartimaeus got a miracle, and Zacchaeus had to give away everything he had. Your waiting won't necessarily end the same as someone else's, and it's not going to look the same to you as it might have done in the past. See, the servants here, they had been given a job, right? They told to invest, and they could invest however they wanted to. You guys have received instructions. I just asked you to hold them up, and you kind of defaulted to a pretty difficult one.
Yep. Yeah.
But God's not trying to trap us, guys. When he's given us standing orders, when he's given you a purpose and you find a purpose even in your waiting, you have freedom to follow the orders and follow the purpose as long as you're being faithful to those orders. I just asked you guys to hold this up. You don't got to overcomplicate it. I'm not trying to trap. I just looked loose. Sometimes this comes off and then all of the weights fall down.
Oh, thank you for that special. Okay.
You betcha.
Cool.
You're too far away. You just don't jiggle that one. We have freedom to proactively gain insight with our thumb of knowledge, to figure out how best to follow the standing orders and the purpose that we have even while we're waiting. We don't have to overcomplicate it. God's not trying to trap you. You don't have to figure out just the right way to do it. You just have to be faithful and consistent. You guys can go ahead and put these down just over here. Thank you guys so much. Can you guys give them a big round of applause? Beautiful lat raise. Really incredible stability. Those are like 20 pounds. Big, strong boys. Incredible. They would have been great. If they were Sicarii, Zacchaeus would have been in so much trouble. You get right up that tree, you know? Big, strong boys. Your waiting won't necessarily look the same as somebody else's. We can't get caught up in the comparison game. Walking out your faith and walking out your orders in the middle of the waiting won't look the same either. It won't look the same as it has for you in the past. You can't get caught up expecting to hear from God the same way that you have before. Moses has these really cool moments where he's on top of a mountain and there's a big ball of fire and God's like, Moses, it's me, Charlton Heston, and I've got really important things to tell you. And then sometimes he's inside of a tent and they're just talking quietly. And sometimes Paul is riding a horse, and Jesus knocks him off of it with a big, powerful, bright laser beam light bulb thing, and he goes blind, and Jesus talks to him from heaven, and is like, Paul, why are you persecuting me, dude? And Paul's like, whoa, that's crazy, that's Jesus. And sometimes guys show up with letters from Jerusalem, and they say, hey, Paul, check these letters out. And the Lord speaks to him through the wisdom imparted to him from peers and brothers and sisters in Christ. It's not always going to look the same, even from how it's looked for you in the past. But God's not trying to trap you in the waiting. You have standing orders, and you have freedom to proactively determine the best way to be faithful with those orders while you are waiting. And when the waiting comes to an end, it's not going to be a trick. You don't have to go wait in a river and catch a salmon that's been eating some acorns from next to a magic well so you can get a cool magic thumb. Jesus isn't trying to trick you. He's not trying to trap you. When your waiting comes to an end, you're going to know it. What I want to leave you guys with is just a quick summary, kind of a conclusion, a wrap-up of the main things I want you guys to get out of this, the stuff that's really hit me and struck me as the Lord has spoken to me through all of this. So there's 6 truths about waiting and walking. A little bit of review and just a reminder. Waiting is not lazy. You shouldn't feel bad or lesser if you are in a period of waiting. You are being faithful. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. And it's one of the most important things you will ever do. Waiting is not being lazy. Don't be upset with yourself or think that you're stuck or think that there's something else that you need to be doing. Don't waste your time while you're waiting. The waiting isn't a waste of time. You're not being lazy. You're being faithful. And waiting is not pointless. You're not spending your time just twiddling your thumbs until God tells you the next thing, or God acts on your behalf, or God restores the thing that needs restoration, or heals the thing that needs healing. There's purpose in the waiting. There's purpose where you are right now. And waiting is not always the same. We just talked about this. You can't play the comparison game. You're not going to be waiting for the same thing as somebody else, and them waiting for something similar isn't a threat to yours. Your waiting won't come to an end the same way that it has in the past, and it won't always result in the same types of actions and experiences as it has in the past. One of the really exciting things is that God isn't ever finished with you. He isn't ever done working with you. And so waiting is in fact walking, or walking is waiting. When you come to a point where the waiting is over and you know how to act and you know how to move, you've been given your next orders or God's moved on your behalf, you're going to find pretty quick as you walk in faithfulness there that you're in another period of waiting. You're waiting now, but where you're waiting now was the answer to something that you were waiting for before. God is never done with us. He doesn't use us once and we're like a disposable paper plate and he chucks us away once he's done with the barbecue. He, for whatever reason, has decided that we are worth investing in and developing and maintaining and nurturing. And so every time that you have grown and achieved and had an experience and a waiting has come to an end, you're going to find he's preparing you for something more. There's more purpose that he has prepared for you. The walking is waiting. Next, walking is faithfulness. It's faithfulness in the little things. It's faithfulness in the waiting. There's things that you've been entrusted with, things that you have, orders that are standing, that even now, while you are waiting, walking in those things will lead you to the purpose. And finally, walking is proactive. He's not trying to trick you. He's not trying to trap you. You have freedom to determine how to follow the orders as long as you're being faithful to the orders. It's not a trap. An illustration that my wife often uses whenever I'm frozen by that analysis paralysis I talked about earlier is God's like cooking dinner, and he's told you to go play in the backyard until dinner's ready. And so I walk out in the backyard, and I've got a swing set, and I've got a slide, and I've got a merry-go-round. Merry-go-round in the backyard? That doesn't make any sense. Maybe a trampoline? Let's go with a trampoline. No, let's do a merry-go-round. That'd be the best backyard ever. And I want him to tell me whether I should do the merry-go-round or do the slide or do the swings. I need specifics. So I get frozen, and I'm wasting my time. I could be having an awful lot of time. In this particular analogy, it sounds an awful lot like something I do with my son, with Owen, where we're like, okay, you go play while we're doing this, because we're wanting him to, there's purpose to it. There's purpose to his waiting. He needs to burn off energy, so we'll go to sleep afterwards. I'm not achieving the purpose of the waiting. I'm not playing, I'm not having fun, I'm not enjoying myself, I'm just frozen. But he isn't trying to trick me. He's not watching through the kitchen window, and he's like, oh, if that boy gets on that slide, oh, buddy. No, he just told me to play in the backyard. God's given you orders. You can be proactive with how you follow them as long as you're being faithful to them. What he has entrusted to you, he trusts you to work with it. I hope that you can find purpose in your waiting, and I hope that you can walk and wait faithfully. It's not easy. It's not always fun, but it's not pointless. Let's go ahead and pray. Lord, you're good, and your mercy endures forever. Father, thank you so very much for not being through with us, for always preparing us for something more, for leading us to something greater. Father, give us the strength and the power through your Holy Spirit to be faithful in the waiting, to walk even while we wait, to be creative and to be led by your Holy Spirit and how to follow your orders even when we're not sure. These things we pray in your holy name. Amen.